Can you hear me okay? I'd like to start off just telling you a little bit about me. I graduated from college with a Master of Accounting degree and worked for a long time in the finance world. I started off in public accounting and spent a couple years in sporting goods retail. And they were good jobs. You know, brought home a paycheck, paid the mortgage, car payments, put groceries on the table, and then I got my first job in healthcare. And I was doing a lot of the same things. I was still working with spreadsheets, tracking numbers and money and buckets of numbers and things, but something happened. I began to realize that that organization could not take care of the people and the community without what I did. Even though I wasn't a doctor or a nurse, I was still an integral, important part of helping to take care of people and to make them better. So I could actually stop, I think, right here as we talk about the financial impact of oil and gas to the hospital here. Without what each of you do in the community, whether you work in the oil and gas field or you work in a county assessor's office, you have something to do with the little bit of property tax and severance revenue that comes to the hospital. And without that, we could not take care of people here in the community. So thank you for what each of you do and the ability that you give us to help take care of people here. We actually save lives every single week of the year here. A little history of where Grand River has been over the last several years. In the late 1990s into the early 2000s, it was actually almost managed into bankruptcy. In 1997, there was just 4 days cash on hand in the organization. Now, those of you that are working and get a paycheck, you realize that that usually takes about 14 days cash on hand to pay payroll. And there's just 4 days cash on hand in the organization. It was functionally bankrupt. And I'm really grateful that the board of directors at that point in time didn't have the common sense to shut the doors and close it, and that they persevered through some very difficult times. They made some key decisions to move away from a quorum management contract, and they took billing and other functions back in-house. They also made another really key decision, and that was to not remodel the old hospital, if anybody remembers that, across the river up on the hill. And they actually built a replacement facility. To do that, it required a bond issue from the community, and you might actually even think of that as a Hail Mary. Without that, I don't think the organization would have survived. So where are we today? In the late 90s, early 2000s, the organization had about 6 providers employed by the hospital. Today we have 45. And lots of different specialties. Many new services have been added over the years: women's programs, 3D mammography, cancer rehab services, pediatrics. We even have neurosurgery here at the hospital. Over 120,000 square feet in additions have been added in the last few years, as including this conference center. Last year, our volumes grew by over 20%. And I don't know if anybody knows what the most expensive piece of equipment in a hospital is. What piece of equipment has the most ability to generate revenue and or incur expenses? And it happens to be a pen when it's used in the hands of a physician. So, you know, without what I'm going to call the perfect storm, none of you would actually be sitting here today. The addition that we're sitting in would not have happened, and you would be holding this conference somewhere else. So the components of the perfect storm, as I would call it, have been new management, a really timely boom cycle with the oil and gas industry, and a good, sound fiscal policy for the hospital. And then, as I said, without each of those components, we wouldn't be here today. So New management. About 9 years ago, I got here as part of a new management team, and I joined the organization as the CFO. Just about 4 years ago, I had the opportunity to become the CEO, and I had a few people ask me if I was in my right mind or not as that happened, and we did that. But as I got here 9 years ago, we discovered, even though we had a really nice new facility, we discovered that there was an old reputation of the hospital, and there were some problems to work on and to overcome. So, what did we focus on? Was it a great marketing, advertising campaign? The finances, being efficient, customer service, capturing market share, recruiting the best and the brightest? Really, we didn't focus on any of those things, but all of those things were a side benefit and a real benefit to what we did focus on. We really focused on what the community wanted, and we focused on the culture and really creating a new reputation and a new brand, if you would, for the hospital. The primary focus of that really being a strong focus on leadership. You might think of leadership as the shadow of the leader, and the leader's job is really to make it easy for people in your organization to do the right thing. So every organization has a culture. Unfortunately, most of those happen by chance, and we didn't want to leave it to chance. So in addition to a strategic plan, which almost everybody has, we developed a culture plan. People are loyal to the culture, not to the strategy. If you think about Southwest Airlines, they didn't earn the highest customer loyalty in the industry with its strategies of fuel hedging prices and bags fly free. Because in fact, the other airlines copied those strategies, but they couldn't copy the culture. If any of you have flown Southwest compared to some other airlines, you've probably sensed a very different personality within that organization. A great culture can also be the ultimate recruiting tool, and even in difficult times, can make it significantly easier for you to recruit as an organization. I'm guessing most of the women in here know who Zappos is. I'm told it's a great shoe shopping experience online and that they have amazing customer service. Getting a job in their call center, and normally working in a call center, you might not think of that as the most desirable of jobs, but getting a call in their call center is more difficult than it is to gain admission to Harvard. Grand River has certainly seen the benefits of an improved culture as we've grown from a dozen employed providers about 3 years ago to over 45 in the last couple of years, adding significant specialties. And the end result of this journey has been a significantly improved reputation, culture, a brand, if you will. But improving the reputation wasn't enough. You can't build new buildings and create new services on a reputation alone. We needed fuel. And the oil and gas industry helped to provide that fuel, pun intended. The property tax revenue that comes to Garfield County, the percentage of that coming from oil and gas. Last year, in 2014, 72% of that was attributable to the oil and gas industry. I was not able to get the same figure for Grand River. I think it's actually a little bit higher. We sit in the part of Garfield County, which I think is very high concentration of oil and gas. So if we look at a couple of slides here, I'm going to jump to this one first. Our days cash on hand. If you look at the beginning of this slide back in 1997, you'll see just 4 days cash on hand. And then here in 2002, there's a great big spike in the days cash on hand. How did they do that in 1 year? That was that Hail Mary, that bond issue that went out to the community that authorized the building of this new facility. So for 1 year, there was some money in the bank that was immediately spent to build this facility, and the days cash on hand dropped significantly. And then we get into the boom cycle of the oil and gas industry, and the days cash on hand begins to build. And then the organization begins to have some cash reserves for the first time in its history. And you might wonder, what happened here in 2008 and 2009 when suddenly there's a big drop through the floor? That was the building of the addition and this conference center that you're sitting in here today. And at the point in time, we did that, and we got down to under 100 days cash on hand. For somebody who's a conservative finance guy, that was a little uncomfortable. And I thought it was going to take 5 or 6 years to get back to where we needed to be to have a comfortable level of cash reserves on hand. So if we look at the property tax revenue, the taller blue bars are Garfield County. The smaller yellow bars are Grand River Hospital. And they seem to pretty much mirror the same flow up and down as gas production went up and down through the years. But look here in 2010, a rather large spike in the property tax revenue for that year. That happens to relate to the year 2008, which was the peak of the boom years. One of the things that's really nice is the recession started in the fourth quarter of 2008. We had a lot of lead time to know it was coming. And we didn't take the big hit in property tax revenue and the big decline until 2011. So we had a lot of time to prepare. That was very nice. But this large increase here in 2010 was the ability to rebuild our cash reserves in just 1 year, rather than the 5 or 6 that I originally thought that would take. And if we also look at the organization, there's another story from this. The value of a day's cash on hand. Back in 1997, it took just over $20,000 a day to run the organization. We've had some pretty significant growth over the years, and in 2014, it was $149,000 a day to run the organization. And you can see the success in the last couple of years that we've had as we've grown from 12 providers to 45 providers. And that has significantly increased the cost to run the organization, but it also is a significant increase in terms of revenue coming into the organization. The other piece of the story that you can see on this graph, even in the early years when things were very tight and there was just 4 days cash on hand, the value of a day's cash on hand increased every year. Beginning in 2009 with the downturn in the economy, we managed the organization very, very tightly, and we managed to hold the value of a day's cash on hand flat for 3 years. It actually declined in the third year, the cost of what it took to run the organization. One of the benefits of the value of the culture that we had developed, we did many of the same things that many of you probably did through the downturn. We had some days off without pay that our employees took through that time period. We actually had employees volunteering days off. We didn't have to mandate or tell them to. We had developed a strong enough culture, and they could see the need in the organization, and they volunteered those days off. So the last component of our success story, I think, and dealing with a large financial downturn was fiscal policy and developing a good policy. If everybody would follow the policy I'm about to share with you, it might solve much of what ails America. And that is to live on a little bit less than what you take in. So the red bars at the top of each of this is what we have lived on here at Grand River of the tax revenue that has come into the organization. So we're living on a relatively small piece. The rest of that money that comes in has been the fuel to build the expansions, to build the buildings, to expand our facility and create new service lines. So, you know, with the policy to do that, it didn't happen by chance. It's really important to develop financial principles. So we set that there was a maximum dollar amount that we would spend in support of operations in any given year. We set goals towards days cash on hand and having adequate cash reserves so that we could handle unexpected emergencies or problems as they came up. You know, we used budgets to monitor our financial performance. You can have an organization who's managing its expenses very well and making a nice bottom line, and it can still be in financial difficulties if they don't have good control of their capital purchasing process, i.e. the toys. You got to have controls in place and make sure, and we developed a robust capital process that created transparency across the organization and helped us to know that we were prioritizing and spending those capital dollars on what the organization needed most. And because we've set principles in place, and those are your rules that you generally follow, doesn't mean that you never violate one of those principles, but you have to think very hard before you do that. You can see 1 year here in 2013 when the amount spent on operations was a little bit bigger than the other years. We had some really big strategic priorities with employing a significant number of physicians during that year, with a very strong plan to get back to our original principle and limited support of operations. And that ultimately has paid off very well for the organization. If you look at our days cash on hand, we had a principle of 180 days cash on hand, and yet at a couple different times in our history, we've dipped down below that principle when it was very important to build a new building or something to expand and help keep our future going. And so lastly, about 4 years ago, when I moved from being the CFO to becoming the CEO, and I had to backfill my position and hire a new person, we felt it was very, very important to make sure the new CFO understood these financial priorities, and we developed a special new employee orientation for him that I would like to share with you now.
Oh, I just can't get these numbers to add up.
It's like we're never going to get out of this hole.
Credit card debt, does it ever end?
Maybe I can help. We sure could use it.
We've tried debt consolidation companies.
We've even taken out loans to help make payments.
Well, you're not the only ones. Did you know millions of Americans live with debt they cannot control? That's why I developed this unique new program for managing your debt. It's called Don't Buy Stuff You Cannot Afford.
Let me see that. If you don't have any money, you should not buy anything. Sounds interesting.
Sounds confusing.
I don't know, honey. This makes a lot of sense. There's a whole section here on how to buy expensive things using money you save.
Give me that. And where would you get this saved money?
I tell you where and how in Chapter 3.
Okay, well, what if I want something but I don't have any money?
You don't buy it.
Well, let's say I don't have enough money to buy something. Should I buy it anyway?
No.
Now I'm really confused.
It's a little confusing at first.
Well, what if you have the money? Can you buy something?
Yes.
Now take the money away. Same story?
Nope. You shouldn't buy stuff when you don't have the money.
I think I got it. I buy something I want and then hope that I can pay for it, right?
No. You make sure you have money, then you buy it.
Oh, then you buy it. But shouldn't you buy it before you have the money?
No.
Why not?
It's in the book. It's only 1 page long. The advice is priceless and the book is free.
Wow, I like the sound of that.
Yeah, we can put it on our credit card.
So get out of debt now. Write for your free copy of Don't Buy Stuff You Cannot Afford. And if you order now, you'll also receive Seriously. If you don't have the money, don't buy it. Along with a 12-month subscription to Stop Buying Stuff magazine. So order today.
All right, thank you.